what's up you guys? My name is Zeta and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you how I study for my exams in college. So, as a biochemistry major, most of my classes are biology, chemistry, and math, and the structure of most of those classes is actually based entirely on exams. So, unlike other classes where you get homework and a lot of assignments that can help buffer your grade, my grades usually are just based on an average of all of your exam scores, which can be kind of scary for a lot of people. So I had to learn the hard way that I had to study and get good at taking exams in order to do well in my classes. I'm going to be sharing with you my strategies and my methods on how I study for exams, so hopefully this can give you some ideas for your studying and help you when it comes to taking your exams. So the first thing that I want to touch on is going to be the frequency and when you should start studying. So I would just like to say there's a big difference between my method on cramming the night before, which I do not recommend. Sometimes you have to. I will say, I kind of hate when people are like, oh yeah, don't cram, that's not good. Of course, we all know that's not good. However, sometimes you end up in that position and unfortunately you made poor decisions that led you there and you just have to cram. And in that time, it does matter to you to get a good grade. And so while it's not the most optimal way to study, sometimes you have to. But I'm not going to be touching on how I cram for exams because I usually don't. I try really hard not to end up in that position. So I would like to talk about when you should start studying, and I would say start studying as soon as possible. The reason I say that, I just had my first week of classes and I've already been doing my daily studying routine for all of my classes. And the reason I say that is because the time in which you study will be so much less and way more efficient if you start early, because you are actually going to have plenty of time to learn and understand the material and actually build upon it the way the course is designed. Most courses that build upon each other are designed where you need to actually understand chapter 1 before moving on to chapter 2. So I try to study at least every other day for that class, and only for about 30 minutes to an hour per class, depending on what kind of class it is and how difficult it is. If you want to check out my other video on how to ace your classes this year, I kind of talk a little bit about that on reviewing practice questions and study sessions after you've already had class. I try to frequently study for my courses, just slowly adding more material onto each other as I progress in the course. So I highly recommend just getting started as soon as possible. I understand that that can be a little bit difficult, but if you're watching this video now at the time that I'm posting it, it's been only a couple weeks of class, so you are likely going to be able to have plenty of time to study. So I just recommend starting early. That way you don't have to spend 12 hours in a day studying for an entire class worth of material. Just start early and do small sessions so that way you can build upon it. Now the next thing I'm going to talk about might be a bit controversial, but hear me out first. So recently I've been implementing a new strategy using AI to study. What I use AI for, specifically, I use ChatGPT, and what has been really helping me for quick and effective practice is I download the PowerPoint for my class and I upload it to ChatGPT, and I ask ChatGPT a prompt that simply says, give me a practice test over all of this material. And ChatGPT will give you a bunch of practice questions. And that is actually what I use. I just use it as practice material. So what I used to do is I used to honestly just look up practice questions. I still do that too sometimes. Now I'm in physical chemistry, and so I just had to brush up on pressure, which PV equals nRT. So I look up practice questions on the ideal gas law. Sometimes I would spend so much time trying to sift through to find good practice material, and honestly, I have found it so helpful to just download your PowerPoint and upload it to ChatGPT and then ask it practice questions, because then they will pull practice questions that are based on your PowerPoint that you have sent in. So a lot of the questions will be directly from the PowerPoint and have the testing material that you will be tested on the real exam. So I highly recommend doing that. If your professor doesn't already provide practice questions, I honestly recommend doing practice questions that your professor provides you, as well as doing some that are from ChatGPT. Just try to get as many practice questions as you possibly can within reason before your exam, and I'm telling you, it will help you get so much faster and so much more confident. Which, speaking of confidence, I do not struggle with testing anxiety, but I know many of my friends that have. I have tutored many people who have testing anxiety, and they understand the material well with me, but then as soon as they get to a test, they freak out and they're unsure how to answer the material, and they automatically just forget about it. If you are somebody who has testing anxiety, one of the big things that I have realized that really helps cut back testing anxiety is by doing a lot of practice problems. Now, you may be wondering, how would that help me? It's because it builds confidence. If you are able to do a lot of practice problems, you will already have seen a lot of types of questions on how the material can be asked. And then you already know how to approach these questions, assuming you're answering them and then getting feedback and seeing if your answer is right. The more questions that you answer correctly, the more you are likely to trust yourself. Hey, I actually know this. I'm actually going to do well on this exam. So when you see the question is going to be probably something formatted similar to something you've already seen before. So then that way you will already be comfortable with the phrasing and the type of material, and you'll feel more comfortable answering it because you've already answered similar questions and gotten them right. So a lot of the times testing anxiety comes down to just not having confidence. If you've never been tested on the material, if all you've been doing is memorizing material and thinking that you're going to walk into the test and suddenly you're going to just know it, you may know it, you may know the material, but you've never practiced actually applying the material. And so you're not going to have confidence in being able to apply the material that you know. So that is why practice problems are so crucial in studying for exams. You need to test yourself in all sorts of ways how the material is going to be tested on the exam. That way you get more comfortable applying yourself and you'll feel more confident walking into the exam. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is something that I do at least weekly. I try to do it at least weekly. Honestly, I do it usually more than once a week, but I aim to try to get it at least weekly. Is I do a big whiteboard dump. Now, you're probably wondering, what in the world is that? If you're anything like me, sometimes in my classes, I have a hard time organizing all of the information in my head. So you go to class and you get bombarded, all this information, you're taking notes, you're reading the textbook, you're listening in class, you're paying attention, then you go after class, you do some practice problems and you review your notes. Sometimes when you're doing all of that, and especially if your classes have a lot of information and go really fast, you may end up in a position like me where a lot of the time the information is just floating all in your head. You kind of know it, you think you have a good grasp of it, you've done some practice problems and you're answering them correctly, but it just feels like all of the information from every one of your classes is just floating somewhere in your brain. And it doesn't feel like it's actually solidified in a proper place for recall. So what I like to do is I like to get a whiteboard and I will just dump out everything that I know for the exam material for a certain class. For example, inorganic chemistry, that's a class I'm in right now. 2 days ago, I just did this whiteboard dump. And so what I did was I just went all crazy over this whiteboard, just writing down everything that I know about electrons, light, diffraction, refraction, reflection, double slit experiment, orbital theory, all of that. I just went crazy on the whiteboard, drawing diagrams and just writing down all of my ideas that I know just off the top of my head, all of the ideas that I have gotten so far, that I've learned so far in the class. It kind of gives you a really good reference point on what you can already just recall. When somebody says, tell me about electromagnetism, can you honestly answer that? Can you go into all of the details that you learned in class about that? So what the whiteboard does is it really puts a visual representation of what you actually remember and what you can actually recall from your brain. And I really like doing this because it challenges myself to have to think about the material without looking at notes or without looking at anything. Just think about the material, I put in some music, and then I just write out everything that I possibly know about it. And this really helps me find areas where I don't know something. Sometimes I remember, oh, in class we totally talked about this, but I have no idea how to explain it. I have no idea where to connect the dots. And so the whiteboard method really helps you connect the dots. I think it's really helpful if you're a visual learner for you to actually see everything that you've written out. Another thing, this one is so powerful. I already talked about this in my other video, how to ace your classes this semester, but I think it deserves an honorable mention again. And it is teaching someone else. Guys, teaching someone, it could be your friend, it can be yourself. If you need to get a camera out like I'm doing right now and explain something from your class, honestly do it. Because just having to talk out loud about something that you learned and explain it in such a depth that you should be able to teach someone else the concept effectively, that is so hard. That is next level mastery of a concept. I think if you can teach somebody something, you have mastered it. So I definitely recommend, especially if it's a concept you're struggling with, is really just try your best to get somebody from your class or whatever it may be. Just try to talk out loud and teach somebody or something. It could be your cat, it could be your dog. Just get practice at talking out loud, trying to explain concepts from your head without looking at notes. Explain concepts in a way that you think somebody else could understand and actually be able to learn the material. And the reason it's really good to do this with someone that can give you feedback, like a friend from your class, the reason that's really helpful is because they can give you feedback. They can tell you, hey, that didn't really make sense, or they can ask you questions about it. So if you get somebody from another class that has no idea what you're talking about, you really can test yourself if you can actually explain the concept in detail enough to explain it to another person who does not understand the material. And because I know if I can usually teach somebody something, I do really well on that concept on an exam. So I definitely recommend trying that. If you are shy, I completely understand. I sometimes just record myself or I just talk out loud in my bedroom and try to explain to myself concepts. Alright guys, well that is just some quick things on how I study for exams. I hope that you found some of my study strategies for exams helpful, or just the things that I think help me a lot for exams. If you don't mind, please like and subscribe to this channel. It really would mean the world to me for your support. And as always, I hope you do amazing on whatever exam you're studying for, and I hope you ace your classes. Have an amazing day. Stay happy and safe. I love you guys. Bye!